The contract arrived on black paper with silver ink, an invitation to hell disguised as a business proposition. Elliot Hayes stared at the terms, his pulse quickening with each impossible clause. Marry Damien Cross, heir to the most powerful crime family on the East Coast, and his father's gambling debts would disappear. Refuse, and his family would join the other unfortunate accidents that plague those who cross the Cross Empire. At 23, he had spent his life protecting his younger sister from their father's failures. Now, he was being sold like livestock to a man whose reputation made demons look merciful. The wedding was set for Saturday. In 3 days, he'd belong to a monster. The Cross Mansion perched on a cliff like a predator surveying its territory. Gothic spires pierced storm clouds, and gargoyles leered from every corner. A fortress built to intimidate and terrify. His hands shook as he signed the marriage certificate, sealing his fate with elegant script. The man beside him wore a black suit that made his pale skin luminous, and his dark eyes burned like embers. Beautiful and terrifying, a fallen angel who'd chosen hell over heaven. "You look like you're signing your death warrant," he murmured, voice silk over steel. "Aren't you?" came the whispered response. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "That depends entirely on you, little bird." The reception was a gallery of criminals in designer suits, murderers and money launderers toasting with champagne while he felt their eyes crawling over him like spiders. He was the newest acquisition, the pretty toy their prince had claimed. When the last guest finally left, his husband led him through corridors lined with oil paintings of dead patriarchs, each one looking more ruthless than the last. "Your room," the older man said, opening a door to reveal luxury that felt like a beautiful cage. "I trust you will find it comfortable." "Our room, you mean?" he said, forcing bravery he didn't feel. The laugh was dark honey. "Oh, sweet thing, did you think this was a real marriage? You're here for show, a pretty wife to make me look domesticated while I run an empire built on blood and fear." He stepped closer, backing him against the doorframe, body heat radiating between them. "But make no mistake, you belong to me now. Every breath, every heartbeat, every desperate little sound you'll make when you realize there's no escape." This close, he could smell expensive cologne mixed with something dangerous, gunpowder and sen. He could see gold flecks in those cold dark eyes, could count the faint scars along his knuckles that spoke of violence delivered personally. A hand came up, fingers wrapping around his throat, not squeezing, just possessing. The thumb pressed against his racing pulse. "Feel that? That's your body recognizing its owner." Heat flooded his system, unwanted and undeniable. His breath came shorter, and he hated the way his body responded to the threat, the proximity, the raw dominance radiating from this beautiful monster. "Sweet dreams, little bird. Try not to think too hard about what I do to pretty things that displease me." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid, leaving him trembling and confused by his own reaction. Living with Damien was like sharing space with a beautiful serpent, mesmerizing and lethal in equal measure. He was gone most days, running his empire from shadow-drenched offices, leaving Elliot alone in the mansion with servants who watched every move. But the evenings belonged to Damien, and those were the most dangerous hours. "Join me for dinner" wasn't a request when it came from lips that ordered executions over breakfast. Elliot found himself at the formal dining room table, an intimate setting for two that felt more like a trap than a meal. "Tell me about yourself," Damien said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "What did you study before your father so thoughtfully offered you as collateral?" "Art history. I was going to be a curator." Past tense. How tragically appropriate. "And now you're a living exhibit in my collection. My favorite piece, actually. The way you move, the defiance in your eyes even when you're terrified. Exquisite." Elliot's fork clattered against his plate. "Is that what this is? Some sick game where you collect pretty things and break them?" "I don't break my possessions," Damien replied, voice dropping to a purr. "I claim them, thoroughly, completely, until they forget they ever belonged to anyone else." The threat or promise hung in the air like smoke, but instead of cowering, Elliot felt something rebellious flare in his chest. "And what if your latest acquisition refuses to be claimed?"
Damien set down his knife, studying Elliot with the focus of a predator selecting which bone to break first. Then he stood up, moving around the table with fluid grace until he was behind Elliot's chair. Warm hands settled on Elliot's shoulders, fingers digging in just hard enough to send electricity down his spine. Then I'd have to remind him exactly who he belongs to, Damien murmured, lips brushing Elliot's ear. One hand slid from his shoulder to his throat, tilting his head back until Elliot was forced to meet those burning eyes. Would you like that reminder, little bird? Would you like me to show you exactly how thoroughly I can own someone? Elliot's breath caught. His body betrayed him with a shiver that had nothing to do with cold. I thought so. Damien's thumb traced along Elliot's jaw, possessive and almost tender. You're not as defined as you pretend to be. Your body knows what it wants, even if your pride won't admit it. He released Elliot abruptly, returning to his seat as if nothing had happened. Finish your dinner. You'll need your strength. For what? Damien's smile was wicked. For learning exactly what it means to be mine. Days bleeded into weeks of careful torture. Damien was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence that invaded Elliot's thoughts even when he was absent. Casual touches became routine, adjusting Elliot's collar at breakfast, steadying him on stairs with hands that lingered on his hips, fingers brushing his neck when passing in hallways. Each touch was calculated, deliberate, designed to drive him slowly insane with anticipation. It was a game of control, and Damien was winning. The breaking point came during a storm that shook the mansion's foundations. Elliot woke to lightning illuminating his room and found Damien standing by his window, still in a blood-stained shirt from whatever violence had occupied his evening. That night, Elliot asked, sitting up in bed. The worst. Damien's voice was raw, dangerous. I had to kill someone tonight. Someone young. I'm sorry. Stop. Damien turned, eyes wild with something Elliot couldn't name. Pain, rage, all need, all twisted together. Stop being soft with me. Stop looking at me like I'm something other than what I am. And what are you? A monster who wants to devour you. The admission hung between them, honest and terrifying. Damien crossed the room in 3 strides, hands framing Elliot's face as he searched his eyes for something. Permission, perhaps, or absolution. Tell me to leave, Damien whispered, thumb tracing his lower lip. Tell me to go before I do something we can undo. Elliot's answer came in the form of fingers curling into Damien's bloodstained shirt, pulling him down. Don't leave. The kiss to follow was explosive, months of tension detonating into desperate need. Damien's hands were everywhere at once, mapping Elliot's body with possessive intensity, while Elliot's fingers worked at the buttons of that ruined shirt, desperate for skin contact. Mine, Damien growled against his throat, teeth grazing sensitive skin hard enough to leave marks. Say it. Yours, Elliot gasped as he back-arced as Damien's mouth moved lower. God, I'm yours. Damien pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, and what Elliot saw there stole his breath. Raw hunger mixed with something almost reverent. I'm going to ruin you for anyone else, Damien promised, voice rough with desire. I'm going to make sure every time you close your eyes, all you see is me. Every touch will be measured against my hands on your skin. Every kiss will taste like disappointment because it's not my mouth claiming you. Then stop talking and do it. What followed was intense and overwhelming. Damien took his time, methodical in his claiming, using his hands and mouth to draw sounds that Elliot didn't know he could make. Every touch was possessive, every kiss demanding, until Elliot was trembling and desperate beneath him. When Damien finally pushed inside, Elliot cried out at the overwhelming sensation. Pleasure edged with just enough pain to make it perfect. Damien set a rhythm that was both punishing and precise, angling to hit spots that made Elliot's he stars.
Look at me, Damien commanded, and Elliot opened eyes he hadn't realized he'd closed. I want to see your face when you come undone for me. I want to watch you break apart knowing that I'm the one who destroyed you. The intensity in Damien's gaze was almost too much, but Elliot couldn't look away, couldn't do anything but feel and need and surrender to the overwhelming sensation of being completely consumed. When release finally crashed over him, it was with Damien's name on his lips and the distinct feeling that he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. Afterward, they lay tangled together in sweat-dampened sheets, both breathing hard. Damien's fingers traced idle patterns on Elliot's spine, possessive even in the quiet aftermath. "No regrets?" Damien asked softly. Elliot thought about how thoroughly he'd just surrendered to a man who'd bought him like property, about how much he wanted to do it again. Only that we waited this long. Everything changed after that night. Damien became openly possessive in ways that should have been suffocating, but instead made Elliot feel treasured in the most twisted way. At business dinners, Damien's hand would rest on Elliot's thigh under the table, fingers digging in just hard enough to remind him who he belonged to. During family gatherings, Damien would touch him constantly, adjusting his collar, brushing imaginary lint from his shoulder, fingers lingering at the small of his back. The message was clear: mine, hands off. "You're marking your territory," Elliot observed one morning after another deliberate display at breakfast with Damien's lieutenants. "I'm reminding people that you're not available. The way they look at you, like you're something they could touch, could have, it makes me want to remove their eyes with a dull spoon." "That's psychotic." "That's honesty." Damien's grip tightened. "You're mine, Elliot, not in the contractual sense anymore, but in every way that actually matters. And I don't share." The possessiveness should have been a red flag, but instead it sent heat pooling in Elliot's stomach. "And what if I want you to be mine too?" Something dangerous flickered in Damien's eyes. "I've been yours since the moment you stopped flinching when I touched you. The question is what you're going to do about it." Elliot pushed Damien back against the nearest wall, claiming his mouth in a kiss that was all teeth and demand. "I'm going to make sure every time you close your eyes, all you see is me," he whispered against Damien's lips, throwing his own words back at him. Damien's laugh was dark and delighted. "Careful, little bird. Keep talking like that, and I'll never let you leave this mansion again." "Who says I want to leave?" The confession hung between them. Elliot admitting that somewhere between terror and desire, he'd stopped wanting escape and started wanting Damien instead. "Dangerous words," Damien murmured, but his hands were already working at Elliot's clothes with familiar urgency. They made it to the bedroom this time, barely, and what followed was intense and passionate. Two people trying to climb inside each other's skin, trying to merge until there was no separation between them. The first test of their dynamic came at a charity gala Damien couldn't avoid attending. Elliot wore a suit Damien had chosen, midnight blue that made his eyes luminous and his skin glow. The appreciative looks he received made Damien's jaw clench with barely contained violence. "Smile, darling," Elliot whispered, patting Damien's arm. "You're supposed to be civilized tonight." Civilized doesn't come naturally when every man in this room is imagining what you look like out of that suit. Let them imagine. Only you know the reality. The words were meant to soothe, but only stoke the possessive fire burning in Damien's chest. He kept Elliot close all evening, hand never leaving his waist, body positioned between Elliot and any potential admirers. Until Marcus de la Cruz approached. "Damien Cross," the French businessman said with an accent that dripped charm. "I've heard so much about your recent marriage. You must introduce me to your stunning husband." Every instant Damien possessed screamed danger. Marcus was known for collecting beautiful things and taking what he wanted regardless of ownership. "Elliot, this is Marcus de la Cruz," Damien said through gritted teeth. Enchanted. Marcus took Elliot's hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that made Damien see red. "You have exquisite taste, Cross. I'm surprised you managed to catch someone so lovely. You're not usually known for your gentler qualities." The insult was wrapped in compliment, calculated to drive a wedge between them. "Damien has plenty of gentle qualities," Elliot said smoothly, reclaiming his hand. "He just reserves them for people worth the effort." Marcus's smile sharpened. "How loyal. Tell me, Mr. Nakamura, what made you choose someone with such a violent reputation?" "I didn't choose him, but I choose to stay."
Elliot leaned into Damien's side, a claim of his own. And that's worth more than any marriage contract. The words hit Damien like a physical blow. Not chosen, but choosing. The difference between obligation and desire. After Marcus finally left with a knowing smirk, Damien pulled Elliot into a secluded alcove, hands framing his face with desperate intensity. "Say it again," Damien demanded. "Say what?" "That you choose to stay. That you want this." Elliot saw the vulnerability beneath Damien's aggressive exterior. The fear that Elliot was still just playing a role, still just surviving rather than wanting Damien. "I choose you," Elliot said clearly, "not because I have to, but because I can't imagine choosing anyone else." The kiss that followed was claiming and grateful at once. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We're leaving," Damien announced. "Now, before I commit murder in front of witnesses." Jealous? Homicidal. There's a difference. Elliot laughed, but let himself be dragged from the gala. They barely made it home before Damien was on him, desperate and demanding, showing Elliot exactly what happened when someone else dared to touch what belonged to him. In the weeks that followed, their relationship evolved into something neither had expected. Damien remained ruthless in business, but with Elliot, he was different. Still possessive and intense, but also protective in ways that went beyond mere ownership. He started consulting Elliot on business decisions, valuing his insights from an outside perspective. He made space in his world for Elliot's interests, acquiring art pieces Elliot admired and converting a wing of the mansion into a private gallery. Most surprisingly, he started reducing the violence in his operations, finding strategic solutions where he would have once chosen bloodshed. "You're getting soft," his second-in-command observed during a meeting. "I'm getting smarter," Damien corrected. "Dead men can't pay debts or forge alliances. There's profit in restraint." But they both knew the real reason. Elliot's presence had shifted something fundamental in how Damien operated, not making him weak, but making him consider consequences beyond immediate gratification. That shift made him a target. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, when Damien was in the city handling a delicate negotiation. Elliot was reading in the garden when armed men in tactical gear swarmed the grounds. He barely had time to scream before a hood was pulled over his head and zip ties bound his wrists. When the hood came off, he was in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, tied to a chair while a man in an expensive suit was circling him like a shark. "Vincent Cross," the man said. "Damien's dear uncle. I'm sure he's mentioned me." He hadn't, but Elliot kept that information to himself. "You're probably wondering why you're here instead of dead." Vincent continued. "It's because you serve a very specific purpose. You see, my nephew has been getting soft, sloppy, making decisions with his cock instead of his brain. So you kidnap his husband? I eliminate the source of his weakness. But first, I use you to lure him into a trap. Damien will come for you. That ridiculous attachment makes him predictable. And when he does, he'll walk into the crosshairs of a dozen snipers. Horror-flooded Elliot's system. You're going to kill your own nephew?
I'm going to save the family business from his romantic delusions. He's compromised, and compromised leaders get everyone killed." Vincent checked his watch. He should be getting your location any minute now, along with a very simple ultimatum. Come alone and unarmed, or we start mailing you back to him in pieces. Elliot's phone buzzed in Vincent's hand. A text message appeared on screen. "On my way. Touch him and you die slowly. D." "Predictable and emotional," Vincent muttered. "Pathetic what a pretty face can do to a once great man." "You don't understand what we have," Elliot said fiercely. "I understand that it makes him weak, and weakness is death in our world." Vincent nodded to his men. "Get him to position. When Damien arrives, kill him before he can speak. I don't want to hear any last words or dramatic monologues." As footsteps echoed away, Elliot struggled against his bonds, trying desperately to think of a way to warn Damien that he was walking into an execution. But there was no warning to give, no way to save the man who'd become everything to him in just a few short months. All he could do was hope that Damien's notorious paranoia would keep him alive. Damien arrived exactly on time, walking through the warehouse doors like he owned the place. He wore his favorite black suit and carried himself with the same lethal grace that had first terrified Elliot. But his eyes burned with fury that made hell look cold. "Hello, Uncle," he said conversationally. "Lovely place you've chosen for our family reunion." "Damien," Vincent emerged from the shadows with a dozen armed men. "I was hoping you'd understand the necessity of this." "Necessity?" Damien's laugh was ice and venom. "You kidnap what's mine and expect me to understand?" "I expect you to die quietly, so I can clean up the mess you've made of our organization." That's when Elliot realized Damien wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the warehouse rafters. Red laser dots appeared on Vincent's men. The sound of safeties clicking off echoed through the space like a death knell. "Did you really think I'd come alone?" Damien asked, voice dropping to something deadly. "After 30 years in this business, did you think I'd walk into an obvious trap without insurance?" Vincent's confidence cracked. "How many men do you have?" "Enough." Damien's smile was winter itself. "I've had you under surveillance for months, dear uncle. I know about your meetings with the Romano family. I know about your plans to eliminate me and take control. I know about your very impressive gambling debts to some very unforgiving people in Moscow." "You can't prove any of that." "I don't have to prove it. I just have to kill you." Damien's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire space. "But first, I'm going to make you understand exactly what happens when someone touches what belongs to me." What followed was swift and brutal. Vincent's men found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered, their weapons clattering to concrete as Damien's forces moved in from every angle. Within minutes, the warehouse was secured, and Vincent was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. Damien cut Elliot's bonds personally, fingered gentle as they checked for injuries, cataloging every bruise and scrape with terrifying focus. "Did they hurt you?" His voice was soft, but Elliot heard the violence lurking beneath. "I'm fine, but Damien..." "Shh." Damien pulled him close, one hand cradling the back of his head while the other pressed possessively against his lower back. "You're safe. That's all that matters right now." He held Elliot for a long moment, breathing him in before turning his attention to Vincent with an expression that promised creative suffering. "You made a critical miscalculation, Uncle," Damien said, still holding Elliot close, like he might disappear. "You assumed that caring about someone makes you weak, but you're wrong. Having something to protect doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you absolutely fucking ruthless about eliminating threats." He looked down at Elliot, something intense and possessive burning in his gaze. "What would you like me to do with him?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elliot realized that Damien was offering him Vincent's life, that the decision between mercy and execution was being placed in his hands. "I want him to know he failed," Elliot said quietly. "I want him to live with the knowledge that we're not your weakness, we're your strength." Damien's smile was proud and predatory. "As you wish." He walked over to Vincent, crouching down to speak directly into his ear. "My husband has just saved your miserable life, but if you ever, and I mean ever, threaten what's mine again, I will show you exactly why people call me the devil." Damien's hand shot out, gripping Vincent's jaw with bruising force. "Are we clear?" Vincent nodded frantically. "Good. You have 12 hours to disappear from my territory. If I see you again, our next conversation will involve pliers, a blowtorch, and significantly less mercy." That night, they didn't make it past the mansion's foyer before Damien had Elliot pressed against the wall, kissing him with desperate intensity, like he needed to confirm Elliot was real, was safe, was his. Never again, Damien growled against his throat. Never again will someone take you from me. I'm here. I'm fine. Elliot's fingers tangled in Damien's hair, holding him close. You found me. I'll always find you. Damien pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, and what he saw there stole his breath. Raw possession mixed with something deeper that neither of them had dared name yet. You're mine to protect, mine to keep safe, mine. I'm yours, Elliot agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like devotion and desire. They made it to the bedroom this time, and what followed was intense. Damien mapping every inch of Elliot's skin as if confirming he was whole and unmarked, while Elliot surrendered to the overwhelming need to be claimed and possessed and thoroughly reminded that he belonged to someone who would burn the world before letting him go. In the aftermath, they lay tangled together while Elliot traced the scars on Damien's chest, a roadmap of violence that had led him to this moment, to this connection. What happens now? Elliot asked. With Vincent gone, with your position secured, now we build something that lasts. I'm not giving up the family business, but I'm changing how it operates. Smarter, not just bloodier. Strategic instead of impulsive. Going legitimate as a crime family can be. And you are going to help me do it. Those art history instincts? Perfect for money laundering through galleries and auction houses. That eye for detail? Invaluable for contract negotiations. You want me involved in the business? I want you involved in everything. You're not just the pretty thing I keep in my mansion anymore. You're my partner, my equal, the person I trust to watch my back and call me out when I'm being an idiot. The words hit Elliot harder than any declaration could have. This wasn't about romance or sentiment. It was about respect, about being seen as more than just an acquisition. Then we build it together, Elliot said quietly. An empire that can exist in both shadow and light. Together, Damien agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that felt like a vow.
6 months later, Elliot stood beside Damien at a charity gala, watching his husband charm politicians and business leaders with the same charisma that had once terrified enemies. The Cross Empire was evolving, shedding its most violent element while maintaining its power through strategic alliances and legitimate business ventures. Art galleries, auction houses, real estate development, all front for moving money, yes, but also genuine businesses that turned profit and employed hundreds. Elliot had become instrumental in managing these operations, his art history background proving invaluable in creating an empire that could withstand scrutiny. No regrets? Damien asked during a quiet moment on the balcony, hand settling possessively at Elliot's waist. Elliot looked at this beautiful, dangerous man who'd been willing to burn the world for him, who had built a new empire on the foundation of their partnership. Only one, Elliot replied. Damien's expression flickered with something that might have been vulnerability. What's that? That I spent the first month terrified of you instead of realizing you were exactly what I needed. And what do you need? Someone strong enough to let me be strong too. Someone possessive enough to make me feel claimed, but secure enough to make me feel free. Elliot turned in Damien's arms, hands settling on his chest. Someone who sees me as a partner, not just a possession. You're both, Damien said. My most valued partner and my most prized possession. And anyone who tries to take you from me learns very quickly why I have my reputation. Possessive bastard. You're possessive bastard. Damien's smile was sharp and genuine. There's a difference. In the distance, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, a kingdom built on blood and shadow, not ruled by strategy and partnership. And at its heart, two souls who'd found something unexpected in each other.
Not salvation or redemption, but recognition. To people who understood that the line between devotion and obsession was thinner than most believed, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world was finding someone worth being dangerous for. "Take me home," Elliot whispered against Damien's ear. "I want to remind you exactly why you're never letting me go." Damien's grip tightened possessively, as if I needed reminding. But he took Elliot home anyway, and spent the rest of the night showing him exactly what it meant to be cherished by the devil himself. Some stories begin with terror and end with surrender. Others begin with contracts and end with devotion. But the best stories, the ones worth telling, begin with two people who discover that possession and partnership aren't opposites, but two sides of the same dangerous coin. This is one of those stories.
Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next story.